Dragon Ball Budokai Tenkaichi 4. I sincerely never thought I would see the day. Yeah, I know it isn't called Tenkaichi 4, but let's be real. This is Tenkaichi 4. Before we get started, let me go ahead and make it clear that I am coming at this as someone who has played countless hours of the Budokai and Tenkaichi trilogies, both in adulthood and back in the day with my friends as a kid, with Budokai and Tenkaichi 3 both being among my most played PS2 games ever, right up there with Jak 2, Time Splitters Future Perfect, and Persona 3. I'm not approaching Sparking Zero as a person who is neutral to Dragon Ball. I grew up on this franchise and it has had a gargantuan impact on me as a person. And even though I used to be an extremely competitive fighting game player, I feel like approaching this game from a competitive standpoint would be doing it a disservice because there's so much more to Sparking Zero than how it plays competitively. I adore Dragon Ball, and I don't have even the faintest spark of shame in saying that, and I no longer have an interest in competitive fighting games. I just want to be clear about that. I'm approaching Sparking Zero as a lifelong fan of Dragon Ball, who just so happens to enjoy talking about art and media for very normal stretches of time. I'm here to judge this game as it compares to the PS2 Budokai Tenkaichi trilogy, as well as how it stacks up to modern Dragon Ball entries like Xenoverse 2 and Fighters. Unfortunately, I haven't played Kakarot yet. Maybe someday. So let's start off with what I imagine is the most immediately obvious element of this game, that being the presentation. It should be obvious to anyone with a functioning set of eyes that this game is absolutely gorgeous. I mean, God damn, look at this fucking game. The animations, the coloring, the lighting and shading. On the surface, this is one of the best looking anime games I have ever seen, easily. And this isn't just in the general style and motion, the actual feedback from combat is downright perfect. When a character like Hercule or Kid Goku lands a punch, yeah, it doesn't have that much weight to it. But when it comes to characters like Broly or Hit, oh man, you feel all of that. And the speed, woo! I mean, this game is blazing at times. It feels so perfectly tuned to the rhythm and pacing of Dragon Ball fights. When you play as an especially fast character like Birder or Super Saiyan 4 Gogeta, you really gotta figure out their rhythm if you want to nail the timings of their combos. It also helps that the arenas themselves are fucking huge. Like, you can really soar off into the sky with these maps, and it's not just vertically either. These maps stretch far and wide, so when you start tearing through the landscape either with your body or blasts, you really feel that impact, and it doesn't take long to see just how much damage you're capable of dealing to the map itself. It goes a long way in conveying the sheer power behind these characters and making you feel as powerful as possible. Simply put, this game wants your fights to feel as epic as you would expect a Dragon Ball fight to feel. And for what it's worth, the sheer scale of the maps and the potential damage you can deal to them also does a great job at creating a wholly different atmosphere to the purely physical fights. This might just be a me thing, but I find it incredibly satisfying to refrain from using ki blasts and sticking to raw fighting, so when somebody finally gets hurled into a mountain or flying through a building because they got punched or kicked that hard, that shit goes fierce. That being said, the presentation definitely isn't perfect either, though the few points of critique I do have are pretty minor in the grand scheme of things. That's not to say they don't matter, just that they don't severely dilute the overall quality of the game's artistic and visual direction. The first and most glaringly apparent issue with the presentation is the lip, or I guess, mouth syncing. Not gonna lie, this looks pretty bad. And it's not as if it's some under-the-radar detail either. You're gonna start seeing this at the start and end of every single fight when characters are doing their intro dialogues. I understand what the system itself is doing and why they chose to go in that direction with it. A frequent issue with anime games specifically is that you can typically tell when the animation is favoring either the English or Japanese dubbing. This system of lip syncing is designed to follow the individual sounds being vocalized by the character in question, and on paper, that's a great idea. In fact, I could actually see this system being really damn good in the future. But right now, oh boy, it ain't great. Especially the Great Apes, I mean, what the fuck? Gotta say, I'm also not the biggest fan of the story mode presentation, or episode battle as it's called. It's not even bad necessarily, but the constant jumping between fully animated cutscenes and this pseudo-manga style approach is just more jarring than anything. I understand budgets are a thing, and fully voicing and animating so many different cutscenes is tiring work, but this doesn't exactly feel like a happy medium either. It also didn't help that sometimes the cutscenes just aren't voiced, and sometimes they are, but most of the time they are. I think. It never felt consistent, and that kind of thing needs to have some consistency to it to keep the production from feeling so slapdash. It'd be one thing if all the manga-style scenes weren't voiced while the animated ones were, but that isn't the case. Sometimes the manga-style scenes are voiced, and sometimes the animated ones aren't. And sometimes the animated scenes are, well, let's just say it's obvious that they drew the short straw when it came to budgeting. This kind of thing really pulls you out of the experience, which is a shame because some of these what-if scenarios are really fucking good. Like, insanely good at times. Trunks in the Tournament of Power, Gohan fucking Black. These are some amazing ideas, but it's so hard to be invested in them when they do this constant back and forth from incredibly well-animated cutscenes and this weird low-budget manga approach, and the fact that some cutscenes are and are not voiced. My last issue with the presentation is the menu layout. It's kind of cumbersome. Now, I'm fully aware that 99% of people probably couldn't give less of a piss about this, and it's worth considering that you will, of course, get used to the menus over time, especially when it comes to character selection, but that still doesn't change the fact that the menus themselves just aren't that intuitive. There's three in particular that I want to highlight, those being the main menu, episode battle mode, and character selection. The main menu for Sparking Zero isn't terrible by any means, in fact, part of me does love it. It's so energetic and lively, it's full of that personality and charm you would expect from a PS2 era Dragon Ball game, and that's great. Cycling menu tabs is contextualized by Goku flying off and teleporting to different locations, and whatever selections you do make will similarly be given their own animations to follow up. It's really cute. I like it. I just wish it didn't feel so weird to actually navigate, especially with the constant frame drops. Episode Battle unfortunately doesn't have nearly the same level of flair as the main menu, and it actually feels worse to navigate. You're not actually supposed to move in the direction the path itself is going, instead you're limited to moving in 4 directions, and you just kinda have to choose whichever direction the path seems to be going in. It's pretty bad, and not to mention just so fucking slow. Oh my god, why is it so slow? Then there's the character selection. It definitely feels like it's trying to follow a similar layout to the original Budokai Tenkaichi games, but, and I say this as someone who adores those games, they weren't exactly the best character selection menus either. BT3 was undoubtedly the best, but even it wasn't perfect. I understand they want to show off the character models with the selection nodes themselves being pretty out of the way, and you know, I get that, I do. But you have to remember that we're dealing with over 180 characters. Remember how Xenoverse 2's character selection was limited to 3 rows even with all of the content that's released for it over the years? Yeah, this is a slightly less shitty version of that, and I say that as someone who also loves Xenoverse 2. Again, I understand that menus aren't going to be that big of a deal to most players, but I think they matter. Games are more than just the moment-to-moment play, and it's okay to talk about less immediately concerning issues. One thing I'm sure was an immediate concern though was the sheer breadth of content, an aspect that many including myself were certain this game would fall short on. Thankfully, I am very relieved to say that Sparking Zero does not disappoint when it comes to the sheer volume of content. I'm not even sure what I was expecting from the story mode, but I was pleasantly surprised to find the story mode actually carries a fair amount of genuinely fresh content to play around with. Lacking presentation aside, there are so many what-if scenarios to unlock, and some of the challenges you have to do to get them, let's just say you really gotta show how bad you want that shit, because this game won't be just handing it to you on a platter. You gotta earn that shit. Then there's the custom battles, a frankly ingenious addition that comes with a host of battles to try out before getting into the actual creation portion of it, which by the way you can share in the community for other players to engage with. This is so awesome. Some of the concepts I've seen explored here are really damn cool, and some were just really funny. And I'm very excited to see what else this community comes up with in the future, especially when the DLC starts coming out. And finally, there's the one thing that everyone knew had to live up to its legacy, that being none other than the roster. Budokai Tenkaichi 1, 2, and 3 were all known for their expansive rosters, featuring practically every character who ever saw any action on screen, even if it was just for a moment. It didn't matter if they were Frieza or General Blue, those games went out of their way to include as much as physically possible, and I know I'm not alone in saying that I thought there was no way Sparking Zero could live up to that legacy in this age of games, most notably fighting games that tend to launch with a pretty minimal amount of content content so they can backload a complete release across multiple season passes. And make no mistake, there are characters missing. There are some frankly strange omissions that I hope are rectified in the future, but for a base game roster to completely eclipse so many higher budget games with multiple season passes, that is actually insane, and I cannot stress that enough. They really went all out here, and they deserve all the credit in the world for living up to a legacy that many gamers had been led to believe was just not possible to aspire to. The amount of videos and posts I saw before this game's release saying there's no way it's gonna have that many characters that were ultimately proven wrong is insane to think about. Now, with that said, there is of course a ton of speculation right now on the potential for this game's DLC. However, even with this game being the knockout smash hit that it is, I am unfortunately still rather skeptical. And I say this hoping that I'm proven completely wrong. Part of the reason for this, though, is just how vague they've been about the Season Pass content. The Season Pass claims there will be over 20 characters, and that sounds awesome on its face. In fact, they might even pull what they did with the final reveal for the base game roster and reveal that there's actually going to be even more characters than we originally expected. And you know, that would be fucking awesome. But will it happen? Well, I hope it does, but there is a real chance that it might not. That being said, the fact that many of the game's base characters are simply transformative states and era-based echoes is something of a cause of concern for me. Let me explain. Beast Gohan is all but confirmed, and everyone wants to see it, but do you really want to see superhero iterations of Base, Super Saiyan 2, and Ultimate Gohan as their own dedicated characters? I wouldn't imagine so. Yet that is potentially a fifth of the characters we can expect from the DLC roster, which would be pretty fucking annoying given the Ultimate Edition content costs nearly as much as the damn game itself. And off the top of my head, Super 17, the 6 other Shadow Dragons, GT Vegeta and his Super Saiyan 1 and 2 forms, Dr. Mew, Fasha, King Vegeta, Great Ape Gohan, Bardock, Nappa, Raditz, Vegeta, and King Vegeta, Supreme Kai, Kibito Kai, Vados, Champa, the other angels, the other gods of destruction, Vegeta, Botamo, Zeno, the Grand Priest, Zeno's guards, General Blue, Arale, King Piccolo, Tambourine, Bandages the Mummy, Spike the Devilman, Mai, Shu, Pilaf, Garlic Jr. Base, Salza, Big Yeti Cooler, Bio Broly, Hachiok, Zangia, Gokua, Bujin, Baseform Harudagarn, Pikkon, Jocko, Apul, Grandpa Gohan, and even Goku and Vegeta Jr., no, not the Cybermen, all realistically could have been featured in the base roster. So is the DLC roster just going to be a small selection of those superhero characters we've already seen in Xenoverse and some Daima minis? I really hope not. Again, this might not be the case, and even if we do see all of those Gohans, it's possible the number will vastly exceed 20 by the time all is said and done. We just don't know, and that feels kinda shady for a Season Pass, hence why I'm so inclined to doubt the Season Pass. And for God's sake, give us manga characters like Moro, Gas, Granola, Black Frieza, and Ultra Instinct 2. Whatever the fuck. Similarly, the fact that anime battle tracks were divided up into not one but two $15 DLC expansions that for some unfathomable reason do not come with the Ultimate Edition does not sit well with me at all. But again, I do hope I'm wrong and that it blows us out of the water much in the same way that the base game has. I'm also curious if we'll be seeing any more arenas added to the game. The arena selection at base is mostly fine, I guess, but why is Namek the only destructible arena? Like, why? Furthermore, there are, like with the roster, many arenas that were omitted, some more understandably than others, but I still think they're worth bringing up, and I hope that we get some new additions as time goes on. I mean, where's Kami's Lookout? I was really looking forward to seeing if it was as destructible as the fight between Gotenks and Super Buu made it out to be back in the anime. What about an outer space map from the Bardock Special or Battle of Gods? Those actually seem like they would be easy additions to the local multiplayer, which is currently, understandably, stuck with the Time Chamber. And what about something completely new and unexplored, like the Otherworld Tournament Arena, King Kai's planet, Beerus and Whis' planet? Hell, what about the locations from the BoJack and Bio Broly movies? Let me dream, okay? Come to think of it, where the hell is, well, hell? Or how about the planet with no name that Universes 6 and 7 fought at? It's easy to say a bunch of characters didn't make it into this game, and that's definitely true, but I would honestly argue that the arena suffered far more so than the roster. The roster is still fucking huge, but the arena pickings are sadly pretty minimal. Not at all bad for a base game listing. I'm not going to be that guy who says the base game itself hasn't given us enough content to chew on. I'm only trying to highlight that there is so much room for more as time goes on, and I hope the Season Pass can fulfill that potential. Dragon Ball is a behemoth of a franchise, and half the appeal of the Budokai Tenkaichi / Sparking games is the sheer volume of content, and I'm just trying to point out how much more could be seen in the game over time if the studio plays their cards right. Is it unrealistic of me to expect all of this content that I mentioned to appear? Sure, of course it is. But goddammit, these games make me believe anything is possible, and I will not be faulted for it. I just want to believe. But let's talk about some more general gameplay elements before we close this out. Sparking Zero is a fucking gem. It retains all of the chaos and over-the-top style of Dragon Ball in a way that only the Tenkaichi games were ever truly capable of accurately reflecting, and its dedication to staying true to those mechanics is absolutely worth commending. For a fighting game to prioritize giving the fans of the franchise what they want and just being a goddamn fun game to play rather than a die-hard wannabe esport that only cares to appeal to the 1% who basically invest their livelihood into that shit is so fucking based. Fighters may very well be a more technically impressive fighting game, though let's be real, the jury's still out on that one, and Xenoverse 2 may allow for more active characters on screen at a time, but that's because Sparking Zero isn't trying to be a top-of-the-line fighting game, and it's not trying to fit into the mold of an MMO. Sparking Zero is here to make you feel like you are playing your own custom-made Dragon Ball anime all the way through, and it's such a fucking blast because of this, pun goddamn intended. Sparking Zero could not give less of a fuck about any of that. It's here to facilitate a damn good time, and holy shit does it deliver. It immediately has an identity of its own that stands out as a truly unique game in the modern age. It isn't just good because it harkens back to some old school games a bunch of fans fondly remember. It stands out because it's a genuinely fresh game that's really fucking good at what it does. And it's no wonder this game has actually been in the discussion to win, or at the very least be nominated for Game of the Year. Personally, I don't really give a shit about any of those things, but the fact that it has managed to break out and achieve mainstream appeal of that caliber is nothing to scoff at for a game as unique as this. I think part of what makes Sparking Zero so popular is the sheer volume of space between its skill floor and skill ceiling. It's a game that appeals to newcomers just as much as it does the veterans, and I know this because in my most recent Halloween party, I had guys who'd never even played these games enjoying it just as much as myself, someone who grew up adoring the Budokai Tenkaichi games. My fellow PS2 enjoyers will remember as clear as day just how unbelievably hard some of the fights in those older games were. There's a reason the words Kid Buu have instilled such a deep-rooted PTSD in so many people. That motherfucker was a goddamn menace. He ain't the founder of Black Air Force for nothing. And now we got Great Ape Vegeta being the first big fat skill check of Sparking Zero and making waves across the internet. And it's not by mistake. That fight is not easy, and he is far from the only one. Some of the later fights against the likes of Kid Buu as base Vegeta, Android 17 in first form Cell as Piccolo, the few Zamasu and Blue Vegito fights. These fights put the fucking hair on your balls, okay? And they will absolutely rock your shit if you don't start getting good. You will not be 100%ing this game if you do not get good. And these skill checks make for some refreshing milestones that prevent any boredom with completing this game. And the easier fights are a refreshing lull as a result, which manages to pace out the game's completion far more effectively than so many other games manage to do. Not only are a fair portion of the fights actually hard, but some of the optional challenges you need to beat in order to unlock alternative story paths are fucking crazy at times. The Piccolo fight against Cell in 17, the Goku Black fights against Goku, Vegeta, Trunks, and Vegito, and the Future Trunks fight against Vegeta, Piccolo, and Gohan were seriously some of the rawest skill checks I have ever seen in a video game. I was almost convinced that the latter fight against Gohan, Piccolo, and Vegeta wasn't even physically possible at that point and needed to be patched. So you better believe that I screamed like I was going Super Saiyan 3 the moment that I realized I had done it. God damn, that shit felt good. Woo! One aspect of the gameplay that I've noticed some controversy around, though, is the beam struggles, and this is one of those things that I understand, but I don't fully agree with either. Look, I played these games back in the day with all my homies, okay? So I get it. Spinning the sticks was mad business back in the day, but nowadays with controllers that cost nearly as much as a full-blown game, which themselves are only getting closer and closer to costing $100 at base, yeah, we can't be fucking with this shit anymore. The simple fact of the matter is, they needed to do something different for beam struggles because we as consumers needed a new mechanic, but I'm also not so sure that this one's really it. It's not entirely clear what you're even supposed to do at first, even as someone who's very familiar with the systems of Budokai 3 that it seems to be iterating on, and figuring it out doesn't get you excited so much as makes you think, oh, okay. It also doesn't help that the clash itself just doesn't really last that long. It's brief, which kinda deflates the hype of the moment. I don't need it lasting the length of a damn episode, don't get me wrong, but surely a few more seconds wouldn't have hurt. Surely I'm not alone in thinking this. There were also a few minor elements of the game that didn't quite stick the landing, one of the most notable for me being the energy blast deflection technique. At its face, this mechanic looks fucking sick. Bitch smacking your opponent's ultimate is absolutely merciless work, and it can make for some truly amazing moments when playing with friends. Unfortunately, the actual mechanics of it are pretty lacking. In fact, they're really just kinda dumb. I don't know, I think it would make a lot more sense for the energy blast deflection to cost Ki instead of SP. Like, instead of going for a beam clash, you just say fuck it and smack that shit away for the same cost? That would be some menacing work. But 2 SP? That is just way too damn much for something like this. Sure, deflecting a powerful blast is a big dick move, but it's also 1,000 times riskier than just dodging or flying around it, both of which, by the way, are far easier to pull off. Sure, smacking away the blast looks cool, but it really only takes 5 seconds of thought to realize that it basically has zero mechanical advantage to it whatsoever, costing way too much for what is essentially a less effective play. Look, style isn't everything, and I say that as a die-hard Devil May Cry fan. The mechanics need to be able to back up the play, and that just isn't the case here. I hope it gets patched. I'd honestly be fine with it even costing a single skill point instead of 2. Just something to offset the mechanical impracticality of it. Moving somewhat away from the gameplay, was I the only one disappointed with the Dragon Balls in this game? I enjoy the free set of supers to summon the Kami no Ryu following certain super arcs, but I don't know. I was pretty done with it by the time I was finally able to summon Porunga and secure the Platinum Trophy. Aside from the free sets that you get following certain story arcs, you pretty much just get the balls as a random reward for play. It's just not very involved, and the rewards aren't exactly exciting either. I pretty much always chose Zenny so I could buy more characters and skins. Kinda disappointing if I'm being honest, especially given how much Xenoverse 2 had on offer with its wishes. Now in fairness, Dragon Ball games don't really have the best track record for, well, hunting Dragon Balls. I think Budokai 3 might have had my favorite system for hunting Dragon Balls, but even it wasn't exactly lighting a spark under its players. I don't know, maybe if you were guaranteed a single Dragon Ball when you play a tournament at max difficulty, or if you got one for every match that you complete without taking damage, just something to motivate you to play and improve at the game. The last thing I wanted to bring up was the character customization. It's fine. Yeah, it's okay, I guess. Kind of. In all honesty, I really wasn't even expecting that much from this before launch, but I hope we can get some more costumes over time, because the current selection is, yeah, it ain't exactly matching up with the girth of its roster. There are so many unused accessory slots, and most characters don't have any sort of alt outfit or even reskin to speak of. We all knew from the start that Goku was going to receive the most alternate attires, but even most of his are just damaged versions of his gi. There are numerous omissions from the alt attires that just don't feel right. Hell, we see Kid Gohan's Dragon Ball outfit from the start of the Saiyan saga in the cutscenes, but for some reason it doesn't even show up as a playable skin. And aside from that, where's the jacket and tank top for Melee Trunks? It's there for Swordmaster Trunks, so why not Smash Bros Trunks? Where's Planet Arlia Scouter Vegeta? Where's my beloved Great Saiyaman 2 suit for Videl? I don't even need it to be a whole second character like it was in Budokai Tenkaichi 3. I just want the costume. I don't know, it just feels like there was a lot of unexplored creative potential here. Like, imagine Goku with a classic Saiyan battle armor, or Vegito in a new mix of Goku and Vegeta's clothes in Super. Come to think of it, why is Vegito Blue wearing Z Vegito's clothes instead of a cross between Goku's new gi and Vegeta's armor? Matter of fact, where the hell is Gohan Black? We get this amazing reveal in episode battle for an alternate timeline scenario where Zamasu took Gohan's body, but we don't actually get to play as him? Oh hell nah, that is some Mortal Kombat level bullshit for real for real. And what business does the Frieza Force soldier have with only 2 models to choose from? That's just pure sacrilege. And another thing, where the fuck is Black Super Saiyan 5 Gogeta? Bring him back, my goat, you cowards! I know it sounds weird to complain about missing content from a game as rich with content as this, but I think the real issue is the fact that certain aspects of the game just don't manage to complement the scale of the roster in meaningful ways. We have a bajillion characters to choose from, but a small handful of arenas that they can fight in. We have customization options, but really only a fraction of the characters have any sort of alt to choose from, and even then, the pickings are pretty slim. These issues don't ruin the game by any stretch, but there's definitely room for improvement, and I hope the devs give us more than just characters over time. At the end of the day though, I'm just glad this game exists, because it's great. It may not be the most epicest, perfectest, Dragon Ballinest game to ever Dragon Ball, but let's be real. The game does 1,000 things right, and the few things it gets wrong are ultimately pretty minute in the grand scheme of things. That's not to suggest they don't matter or that the devs shouldn't try and improve upon them, just to say that it's obvious why people are taking to this game as much as they have, despite those issues. Sparking Zero is an insanely well-produced and competent game that does so much right, and honestly, it might be the best anime game I have ever played to this point. And I would have to be out of my damn mind to suggest, even with its flaws, that the game is anything but an absolute banger. I'm so happy to be able to say that Sparking Zero is the Budokai Tenkaichi 4 that we have waited 17 years for. And all in all, is just a damn fantastic video game. Easily my runner-up for Game of the Year. Ain't nothing gonna beat Persona 3 Reload, but hey, getting second place to the literal best game of all time, that's nothing to be ashamed of, right? Goku may not be able to beat Zeno, but that doesn't mean he's not a legend in his own right. Dragon Ball Sparking Zero is phenomenal, and I really do hope the DLC lives up to the expectations and turns this game into something even greater when all is said and done. If this game gets even half the support of Xenoverse 2 or even Fighters, I'll be good.